The Thing in Our Garage. True story from Houston, Texas. In 2015, my entire family witnessed something that made us collectively erase our own memories. What we saw in our garage that Sunday wasn't just impossible, it was wearing my 7-year-old son's face, and it wanted us to come closer. My name is Maria Hernandez. I'm a night shift nurse at Houston Methodist, and what I'm about to tell you is the reason why I can never work overtime on Sundays anymore. This happened in August 2015 when my youngest son, Alejandro, was 7 and his brother Samuel was 10. We lived in Katy, one of those sprawling Houston suburbs where every house looks identical, except for the color of the brick, and everyone pretends their HOA fees guarantee safety from the world's darkness. That particular Sunday, August 23rd, started like any other weekend in Texas summer hell. The temperature had already climbed to 98 degrees by noon, and the weather app promised it would hit 104 before the day was through. The local news kept warning about heat stroke, showing graphics of eggs frying on sidewalks, reminding people to check on elderly neighbors. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift in the cardiac unit dealing with 3 code blues and a particularly difficult family who insisted their 90-year-old patriarch didn't need a DNR because Jesus would heal him. My scrub still smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant and that peculiar mix of bodily fluids that never quite washes out no matter how much bleach you use. The exhaustion sat heavy in my bones, that particular kind of tired that makes your skin feel too tight and your thoughts move like molasses. Eduardo, my husband, had actually been home for once. As a petroleum engineer for Shell, he usually spent weekends reviewing drilling reports or flying out to some godforsaken rig in the Gulf. His job paid for our comfortable life, but it also meant he missed more family dinners than he attended, more soccer games than he saw. But that Sunday, miraculously, he was ours. No emergency calls from offshore platforms, no urgent emails about pressure readings or equipment failures. He'd promised the boys we'd go to Costco, their favorite weekend adventure, if you can believe it. For kids raised in the suburbs, the warehouse store might as well have been Disney World. Samuel loved the free samples, methodically planning his route through the store to hit every station twice. He'd developed a system starting with the frozen section and working counterclockwise, timing it, so he'd arrive at each sample station just as they put out fresh batches. The sample ladies knew him by name, this skinny 10-year-old with Eduardo's sharp features and my stubborn streak. Alejandro just wanted to ride in the massive cart and play games on my iPhone while we shopped, his little legs dangling, occasionally kicking his brother when Samuel got too close. The shopping trip itself was unremarkable, filled with the mundane negotiations of family life. We bought the usual suburban survival kit, 48 bottles of water because Houston tap water tasted like chlorine, and regret enough paper towels to clean up after the apocalypse, a rotisserie chicken that would become 3 different meals if I was creative with leftovers, and those goddamn fruit snacks that Alejandro insisted he needed for school lunches even though school didn't start for another 2 weeks. The air conditioning in Costco had been blessed relief so cold that Alejandro complained his arms had bumps, and Samuel zipped up his hoodie, the same hoodie he'd refused to leave in the car because it wasn't even that hot, Mom. Samuel had entered that delightful preteen phase where everything annoyed him. The cart was too slow, the samples were for babies. And why couldn't we just order everything online like normal people? His voice had started cracking the month before, adding an extra layer of mortification to every public outing. I remember thinking that if this was 10, I wasn't ready for 13. I'd already caught him trying to grow facial hair that looked more like dirt smudges than anything masculine. The drive home took 40 minutes through Sunday traffic, everyone returning from church or heading to late lunches at the Tex-Mex places that lined Highway 99. We passed the same landmarks we always did, the mega church that looked like a shopping mall, the strip center with the nail salon. I kept meaning to try the intersection where they'd been doing construction since Obama's first term. Alejandro sang along to some Disney song playing through the Bluetooth Let It Go for the 1,000th time, his voice high and sweet, occasionally hitting notes that made Eduardo wince and adjust the volume. Samuel sat in sullen silence, earbuds jammed in, pretending he was too cool for family time, but still stealing glances at his little brother's performance, a tiny smile tugging at his lips when Alejandro really got into it, complete with hand gestures. Our house sat at the end of Meadowlark Drive, a cul-de-sac that real estate agents love to call family-friendly and private. Really, it just meant we had to look at the same 5 houses every day and pretend we didn't notice when the Johnsons fought loud enough for the whole street to hear. The attached garage had been one of the selling points when we bought the place in 2009, right after the market crashed and prices finally became reasonable for a nurse and an engineer trying to raise 2 kids. The previous owners had fled to California, leaving behind a swing set we still hadn't taken down, and a mysterious stain on the garage floor that looked disturbingly like a body outline. The garage always smelled like motor oil and cut grass, a combination that Eduardo claimed was the smell of suburban success. He'd installed pegboard on one wall, organizing his tools with the precision of a surgeon, each hammer and wrench outlined in Sharpie, so he'd know if something was missing. My corner had devolved into a graveyard of good intentions, the elliptical machine that now held Christmas decorations, boxes of baby clothes I couldn't bear to donate Alejandro's artwork from kindergarten that I swore I'd someday organize into scrapbooks. The air conditioning unit in there had broken 2 weeks prior, transforming it into a concrete oven that could have doubled as a torture chamber. Eduardo kept promising to fix it this weekend. But this weekend had become next weekend, had become some time before Halloween. The temperature inside regularly exceeded the outdoor temperature by 10 degrees, the concrete walls and metal door turning it into an efficient heat trap. Eduardo hit the automatic door opener as we pulled up the mechanism, groaning and clicking in protest. We'd been meaning to get it serviced for months. Another item on the endless list of home repairs that somehow never got done, despite Eduardo being an engineer who could probably fix it himself if he ever found the time. The door lurched upward in jerky movements like it was fighting against its own weight. We all piled out quickly once inside, eager to escape the heat that hit us like a physical wall. The garage door groaned closed behind us, sealing us into our concrete furnace. The sudden darkness after the blazing sunlight made everyone blink and stumble slightly. My eyes took too long to adjust, leaving purple after-images dancing in my vision. I could hear the metal of the car ticking as it cooled, could smell the rubber of the tires mixing with that ever-present cocktail of suburban garage smells. Something else, too, underneath it all, sweet and wrong, like fruit left too long in the heat. "Boys, help with the groceries," I called out, already knowing Samuel would grab the lightest bag and disappear while Alejandro would try to carry something twice his weight and need rescue. It was our Sunday dance, choreographed by repetition. The kitchen door stood just 3 feet from where we parked, a deliberate choice to minimize the distance groceries had to travel in Houston's heat. The previous owners had actually moved the door for this exact purpose, understanding the Texas arithmetic of distance versus temperature. I grabbed the paper towels and watered my muscles, protesting the wait after my long shift. Eduardo took the bulk items, his arms still strong from his roughneck days before the degree before the desk job. The boys performed their predictable grocery-carrying theater, Samuel with a single bag of hamburger buns, Alejandro struggling with a 12-pack of Gatorade that kept slipping from his small hands. The digital thermometer Eduardo had installed because engineers can't resist quantifying misery showed 101 degrees inside. Its red numbers glowed accusingly like we'd personally offended it by existing in its space. No wonder the boys were whining about the smell, a combination of heated metal old lawn chemicals and something sweet sick I couldn't identify, probably a dead mouse in the walls. Or maybe a bird that had somehow gotten trapped and died in the rafters. Texas garages were graveyards for small creatures seeking shelter from the heat. "Mom, it stinks in here," Alejandro announced. His nose wrinkled dramatically, his whole face scrunched up in disgust. "Just a few more trips, mijo," I assured him, though privately I agreed. There was something particularly rank about the smell today underneath the usual garage funk. It reminded me of the hospital's morgue when the air conditioning failed last summer. That particular sweetness that catches in your throat and makes you breathe through your mouth even though you can then taste it. We established an efficient chain passing groceries from car to kitchen counter. Eduardo organized with military precision grouping items by storage location, pantry, fridge, freezer. His time on the rigs had taught him efficiency, the importance of everything having its place. Samuel had already vanished upstairs, his obligation fulfilled with one bag of bread, his door slamming with teenage authority. It was exactly 3:47 p.m. when we finished. I know because I glanced at the microwave clock while putting away the last of the frozen vegetables, calculating how many hours until I had to leave for my next shift. 28 hours of freedom before returning to the land of beeping monitors and code browns. The kitchen finally looked normal again, not like a Costco had vomited its contents across every surface. That's when Alejandro realized his iPad was missing. Mom. His voice pitched toward panic, the particular frequency that sets off every maternal alarm. So go get it, I said, not looking up from the refrigerator. 10 seconds. That's all the time that passed. I heard the door slam and Alejandro's feet running across our tile floor. When I looked up, his face had drained of color. Mommy, he whispered, grabbing my hand. I'm in the car. Through the door's window we could see into the garage's darkness, and in the back seat in Alejandro's usual spot, something sat wearing his face. But the smile was wrong, too wide, too many teeth gleaming in the darkness. As we watched frozen in suburban terror, it raised one small hand and waved at us. Slow, deliberate. I counted 6 fingers. The thing in the car didn't move like Alejandro. When it shifted position, leaning forward against the seatbelt, its movements were too fluid, too graceful, like water flowing uphill. My son, my real son, pressed harder against my leg, his fingernails digging into my palm through his death grip on my hand. I could feel him trembling, those little boy tremors that broke my heart even as my mind struggled to process what we were seeing. Everyone back away from the door, Eduardo said, his voice steady, but I knew him well enough to hear the fear underneath. 20 years of marriage teaches you the subtle variations in your partner's voice, the difference between angry tired and scared tired, between joking serious and deadly serious. This was a tone I'd never heard before, something primal and protective that probably went back to caveman days when fathers stood between their families and saber-toothed tigers. But none of us moved. We couldn't. The wrongness of what we were seeing had short-circuited our flight response, leaving us frozen like deer staring at headlights, if the headlights had too many teeth and wore your child's favorite shirt. Is that, Samuel started, then stopped, his voice cracking, not from puberty, but from fear. Why does it look like Alejandro? The thing in the car tilted its head at the sound of Samuel's voice, a motion that went 15 degrees too far, like its neck had extra joints or no joints at all. The smile never changed, that fixed rictus of too many teeth in too small a mouth. In the strips of sunlight filtering through the garage door gaps, I could see its eyes, now Alejandro's brown eyes, but wrong. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They were like paintings of eyes, perfect in detail, but missing something essential, something alive. Nobody goes in there, Eduardo said, finally breaking our paralysis by stepping in front of us, shielding us with his body. Maria, take the boys inside. Call 911. And tell them what? I whispered, my voice barely working. That there's a copy of our son in the car, that something is wearing his face. Even in my terror, the practical part of my brain, the part trained by years of emergency medicine, knew how insane this would sound. We'd be lucky if they sent police instead of psychiatric services. Tell them there's an intruder, Eduardo said, not taking his eyes off the garage. Tell them anything. Just get the boys inside. But before I could move, before any of us could act on this sensible plan, the thing in the car did something that made my bladder nearly release right there on my kitchen floor. It opened its mouth, that too wide mouth with those gleaming teeth, and I heard Alejandro's voice. Not similar to Alejandro's voice, not an imitation, his exact voice down to the slight lisp he had from losing his front teeth last month. "Mommy," it said, and the word floated through the door's window like poisoned honey. "Mommy, help me, I'm scared." The real Alejandro made a sound I'd never heard from him before, something between a sob and a scream muffled against my scrub pants. Samuel stumbled backward, hitting the kitchen counter hard enough to rattle the dishes in the drying rack. "That's not me," Alejandro wailed. "That's not my voice, I didn't say that." The thing's smile somehow got wider. Eduardo's hand went to the kitchen drawer where we kept the serious knives, the German ones his mother had given us as a wedding present. But what good would a knife do against something that shouldn't exist? What exactly was he planning to do? Stab a hallucination we were all somehow sharing? "The gun," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "The Glock. It's in the bedroom safe." Eduardo looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the same thought I was having. What if bullets don't work on something that isn't supposed to be real? But before he could respond, the lights in the garage started flickering. Not flickering like an electrical problem, flickering in a pattern, a rhythm like Morse code or a heartbeat. The overhead fluorescent tubes Eduardo had installed last year dimmed and brightened in waves, casting shifting shadows that made the thing in the car appear to move, even though it remained perfectly still. "Daddy," it said in Alejandro's voice, and now there was something else in the tone, something underneath the perfect mimicry that sounded like television static made into words. "Daddy, why won't you help me?" "Stop it," Samuel shouted, his voice breaking completely now, tears streaming down his face. "Stop using his voice!" The thing's head snapped toward Samuel so fast I didn't see it move. One moment it was facing forward, the next it was staring directly at him through the window. And then it did something that made me pull both my boys behind me in pure maternal instinct. It stood up, not stood up like a child getting out of a car seat. It rose smoothly like smoke, the seatbelt passing through its body as if one or both of them weren't solid. Its head should have hit the roof of the Honda. Alejandro always complained about having to duck when he stood up in the car. But the thing's head passed through the metal like it wasn't there, and it kept rising until it stood at its full height, still child-sized, but wrong, like someone had stretched a 7-year-old on a medieval rack, proportions all off, arms too long, neck too thin. "I need to get my iPad," it said in that stolen voice, and started walking toward the car door. "Move!" Eduardo shouted, grabbing Samuel while I scooped up Alejandro, even at 7, almost too heavy for me to carry. But adrenaline is a hell of a drug. We scrambled backward through the kitchen as the sound of the car door opening echoed through the garage. Not the normal click and creak we heard 100 times a week, but something else, like bones breaking in reverse, like something healing wrong. We made it to the living room before we heard the kitchen door open. I know it opened because I heard the weather stripping brush against the tile, heard the slight squeak of hinges I'd been asking Eduardo to oil for months. But I also know with the certainty of someone who's checked that door's lock every night for 6 years that we had locked it. Eduardo always locked it even when we were home, a habit from growing up in a rougher part of Houston. "Don't look back," I told the boys, though every instinct screamed at me to turn around to face whatever was coming. "Just keep moving." But Alejandro looked. Of course he did. He was 7, and 7-year-olds look when you tell them not to, especially when they're terrified. He peered over my shoulder, and what he saw made him bury his face in my neck, his tears hot against my skin. "It's crawling," he whispered. "On the ceiling. Like Spider-Man, but wrong." I ran faster, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood, Eduardo beside me, practically carrying Samuel, who seemed to have gone into shock, his face gray and eyes unfocused. We burst into our bedroom and Eduardo slammed the door, locking it, then dragging the heavy dresser in front of it in one adrenaline-fueled heave that sent our family photos crashing to the floor. Glass shattered our wedding picture, now a spiderweb of cracks across our young, smiling faces. The frame from Alejandro's first birthday, where he had cake smeared across his chubby cheeks, lay in pieces, but I couldn't care about that now. Eduardo was at the safe, fingers shaking as he punched in the code. Wrong. Try again. Wrong. The date, I said. Our anniversary date. I know the fucking date, he snapped the first time he'd ever cursed at me, but I understood. Fear makes us cruel to the ones we love most. Third try. The safe clicked open. The Glock 19 sat there black and lethal and suddenly seeming very small against whatever was in our house. Eduardo grabbed it, chambered around with practiced ease. He went to the range twice a month, said it was about responsibility, about being prepared. But prepared for what? For home invasions, sure. For burglars, maybe. But for your son's face on something that crawled on ceilings, shells. Samuel said suddenly, his first words since we'd run. In movies, salt shells work on supernatural things. This isn't a movie, Eduardo said, but I could see him considering it, the engineer's mind, trying to find logic in the impossible. Then we heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Not Alejandro's light padding, or even adult footsteps. These were wrong, too many of them, like something with more than 2 feet, or like someone walking on their hands and feet at the same time. They stopped right outside our door. "Mommy?" came Alejandro's voice, muffled by wood and the dresser, but still perfectly clear. "Why did you lock me out? I'm scared." Alejandro, the real one, clamped his hands over his ears. "Make it stop! Make it stop using my voice!" The doorknob rattled, gently at first, like a child trying to be quiet, then harder. The dresser shifted slightly despite its weight scraping against the floor with a sound that set my teeth on edge. "Let me in," it said, still using that perfect mimicry of my baby's voice. "Please, Mommy, there's something scary out here." "Check the windows," I whispered to Eduardo. Our bedroom had 2 windows facing the backyard. If we could get out, get to the car. No, the car keys were in the kitchen. The neighbors, then. The Johnsons were usually home on Sundays. Eduardo moved to the windows, gun raised, ready for anything. Or so he thought. Because when he pulled back the curtain, the thing was there, pressed against the glass, still smiling, still wearing Alejandro's face. But now I could see it more clearly in the daylight, and the wrongness was even worse. Its skin was too perfect, like a doll's, with no pores, no small imperfections that make a face human. The eyes didn't track our movements so much as exist in a state of constant observation, like painted eyes that seemed to follow you. And the teeth, Christ, the teeth went too far back into its mouth, row after row, like a shark's, all perfectly white and human-shaped, but there were just too many of them. Eduardo stumbled backward, nearly dropping the gun. The thing at the window tilted its head again, that horrible, too-far motion, and I realized it wasn't actually standing on the ground. Our bedroom was on the 2nd floor. It was clinging to the brick somehow, suspended 15 feet up, like gravity was optional. "Shoot it," I said, surprised by the coldness in my voice. The nurse in me, trained to preserve life, had been overridden by something more primitive, a mother protecting her children. Eduardo raised the gun, aimed. His hands were steady now, the initial shock replaced by determination. The thing at the window watched with Alejandro's eyes, still smiling like this was all a game. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. My ears rang a high-pitched whine that made Samuel cry out. The window exploded outward in a shower of glass and wood splinters. But the thing wasn't there anymore. Not blown backward by the bullet, not fallen to the ground below. Just gone like it had never been there at all. "Did you hit it?" Samuel asked, voice muffled by the ringing in my ears. Before Eduardo could answer, we heard laughter. Alejandro's laughter, the specific giggle he made when Eduardo tickled him, coming from everywhere and nowhere, from inside the walls, from under the floorboards, from the air itself. "It's inside the house," I said, pulling both boys closer. It's not just in the house, it's in the house. The light started flickering again, that same rhythmic pattern, but now I understood what it reminded me of. It was breathing. The whole house was breathing in time with those flickers, like we were inside something alive. "We need to leave," Eduardo said. "Now. Forget the car, forget everything. We run to the neighbors." He moved the dresser just enough to crack the door open, gun ready. The hallway beyond was dark, too dark for 4 p.m. on a summer day. Not dark like the lights were off, but dark like light itself was being eaten, consumed by something hungry. "Stay close," he said. "No matter what you see, what you hear, don't stop. Don't look back." We stepped into that unnatural darkness, and I felt the temperature drop 30 degrees in an instant. Our breath came out in clouds, impossible in August, impossible in Texas. The family photos lining the hallway walls were wrong. In each one, there were 5 people instead of 4. The fifth figure stood behind us in every shot, tall and thin, with too many joints in all the wrong places, always smiling with too many teeth. But its face in every photo was Alejandro's. "Don't look at them," I said. But it was too late. We'd all seen them. The Christmas photo from last year, all of us in matching pajamas, and behind us something wearing my baby's face but stretched and distorted like silly putty pulled too far. Samuel's first day of school, picture him proud with his new backpack, and in the background by the school bus, that thing waving with 6-fingered hands. The stairs were ahead, barely visible in the consuming dark. We moved as one unit, Eduardo leading with the gun, me carrying Alejandro, Samuel gripping my shirt so tight I could feel his nails through the fabric. The house had gone silent except for our breathing and footsteps. Even the ever-present hum of the air conditioning had stopped. We made it halfway down the stairs when the photograph started changing. Not all at once, but in sequence like a flipbook animation. In each photo, the thing wearing Alejandro's face got closer to the camera, closer to us, until in the last photo at the bottom of the stairs, it filled the entire frame, just teeth and eyes and wrongness. 3 more steps, Eduardo whispered. Then we run. 3 steps, 2 steps, 1. The front door was right there, 20 feet of living room away. Afternoon sunlight leaked around its edges, promising safety, normalcy, a world where things didn't wear your child's face and crawl on ceilings. Eduardo's hand reached for the deadbolt. The door swung open before he could touch it. The thing stood there, backlit by summer sun, still wearing Alejandro's Minecraft shirt, but now the shirt was pristine, like it had just come from the store. It wasn't smiling anymore. Its mouth hung open, jaw unhinged like a snake's. And inside that mouth was darkness deeper than the hallway, deeper than closed eyes, deeper than the space between stars. And from that darkness came a sound that wasn't Alejandro's voice anymore. It was all voices, every voice, 1,000 children speaking in unison. "Why don't you want to play with me?" Eduardo raised the gun and fired, point blank. The bullet passed through the thing like it was made of smoke, shattering the porch light behind it. The thing didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there with its mouth open, waiting. That's when I noticed something that made my nurse's training kick in, that medical eye for detail that had saved lives in the ER. The thing wasn't breathing, no rise and fall of the chest, no flutter of nostrils. It was perfectly unnaturally still, like a photograph of a person rather than a person itself. "It's not alive," I said, the revelation hitting me with the force of divine truth. "Eduardo, it's not alive, it's something else." "Then what?" Eduardo started, but the thing moved. Fast, faster than anything should move. One moment it was in the doorway, the next it was inches from Eduardo's face, studying him with those painted doll eyes. "I like your fear," it said, and now its voice was nothing like Alejandro's, nothing like anything human. It sounded like wind through broken glass, like static between radio stations, like the last breath of something dying. It tastes like copper pennies and spoiled milk. Eduardo pulled the trigger again, the shots deafening in the enclosed space. The bullets passed through empty air. The thing was behind us now, beside us now, everywhere and nowhere, multiplying or moving too fast to track. The house filled with the sound of Alejandro's laughter played backward, a sound that would haunt my dreams for the next 7 years. And then suddenly silence. We stood in our perfectly normal living room, afternoon sun streaming through windows that weren't broken. No bullet holes in the walls, no shattered glass, no impossible darkness. Even the family photos on the stairway wall were normal, just the four of us. No fifth figure, no distortion. The only evidence that anything had happened was the dresser still blocking our bedroom door upstairs, and the fact that all four of us were standing in the living room, trembling, tears streaming down our faces. "The garage," Alejandro whispered. "Check the garage." Eduardo went, gun still in his hand, though his faith in its usefulness had clearly evaporated. We followed because being separated seemed worse than any danger. The kitchen door to the garage stood open. Hadn't we closed it, locked it? The garage itself was empty, normal, just concrete and tools and the lingering smell of motor oil. The car sat exactly where we'd parked it, doors closed. Nothing in the back seat but Alejandro's iPad sitting on his booster seat like it had been placed there carefully, deliberately. Eduardo set the iPad on the kitchen counter like it was made of plutonium. We all stared at it, this stupid tablet that had started everything, or at least had been the excuse for everything to start. The screen was dark, but when Alejandro's finger accidentally brushed it, it lit up, showing the lock screen 3:58 p.m., the exact same time showing on our microwave, our stove, Eduardo's watch. Every clock in the house frozen at that impossible moment. "We need to get out," I said, my voice barely working. "Pack bags. Go to a hotel. Call a priest, a psychiatrist, I don't care, but we're not staying here tonight." But even as I said it, I knew something was wrong with the idea. The thought of leaving felt slippery, like trying to hold water, like my mind couldn't quite grasp the concept. I'd think pack clothes, and the thought would dissolve before I could act on it. Samuel was the first to voice it. "Mom, I can't remember why we need to leave." The forgetting had already started. Eduardo shook his head hard, like a dog shaking off water. No, we all saw it. The thing in the car. The thing that looked like—" He gestured at Alejandro, but couldn't finish the sentence. His eyes were already getting that unfocused look, that defensive glaze the mind develops when reality becomes too much to process. "Write it down," I said, grabbing the magnetic notepad from the refrigerator. But when I tried to write something pretending to be Alejandro, my hand cramped. The pen skittered across the page, leaving meaningless scratches. The harder I tried to document what happened, the more my thoughts felt like they were moving through thick syrup. That's when Pastor Jim arrived. We hadn't called him. I need you to understand that we hadn't called anyone. Our phones had no outgoing calls logged, no texts sent. But there he was at our front door at 5:17 p.m., his white Ford F-150 with the fish symbol and John 3:16 inches bumper sticker parked in our driveway like it belonged there. "Eduardo Maria," he said when my husband answered the door, and his voice had that careful tone people use around trauma victims. "I felt called to come check on y'all. The Lord put it on my heart that you might need some prayer." Pastor Jim was from First Baptist Houston, the mega church 2 miles away, where we attended exactly twice a year, Easter and Christmas, out of cultural obligation more than faith. He was a big man, 6'3", with hands like catcher's mitts, the kind of Texas pastor who looked like he could have played college football and probably had. He wore jeans and a polo shirt with the church logo, casual Sunday afternoon attire, but he'd brought his serious Bible. The leather-bound one with gilt edges and his name embossed on the cover, the one he used for funerals and exorcisms. Did Baptists even do exorcisms? I was Catholic before I married Eduardo, and even then I'd thought possession was medieval nonsense. But here was this Protestant pastor standing in our doorway with holy water in a Dasani bottle and a vial of olive oil he probably bought at H-E-B, and somehow that seemed like exactly what we needed. "Something happened," Eduardo said, and I could hear him fighting against whatever was eating our memories. In the garage, with Alejandro, with something that looked like Alejandro. Pastor Jim didn't laugh, didn't look skeptical. He nodded slowly, like Eduardo had just confirmed something he'd suspected. I've been feeling it all day. A wrongness in the spiritual atmosphere, like something tore a hole where it shouldn't be. He came inside without asking, moving through our house with purpose. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped at the doorway to the garage, and I saw him shiver despite the August heat still radiating from outside. "It came through here," he said, not a question. "Something that wears faces that don't belong to it." "You believe us?" Samuel asked, and the relief in his voice nearly broke me. "Son, I've been ministering in Houston for 27 years. This city, this whole area, it's built on things that should have stayed buried. The Karankawa people who lived here before, they had stories about spirits that could take any shape, wear any face. The oil we drill, the ground we disturb, sometimes we wake things up that should keep sleeping." He opened his Bible to a page already marked with a yellow sticky note, Ephesians 6:12. "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." "Will prayer make it stop?" I asked, though even forming the question took enormous effort. My mind wanted to slide away from the entire conversation to pretend we were discussing something else, anything else. "Prayer might close the door it came through," Pastor Jim said, "but first we need to understand what opened it." He turned to Alejandro, knelt down to his eye level. "Son, this is important. Have you been playing any games you shouldn't, using any apps that might have invited something in?" Alejandro shook his head frantically. "Just Minecraft and PBS Kids, I promise." "What about you, Samuel? I know older kids sometimes mess with things, Ouija boards, Charlie, those internet challenges." "No, sir," Samuel said quickly, too quickly. His ears turned red, a tell he'd had since he was 3. "Samuel," Eduardo's voice had that paternal weight that demanded truth. "It wasn't anything bad," Samuel protested. "Just this thing kids at school were doing." The elevator game. You're supposed to press elevator buttons in a certain order and it takes you to another dimension or whatever. But our house doesn't even have an elevator. I just did the pattern on the garage door opener. Up, down, up, down, down. Nothing happened. When, I asked, though I already knew the answer. "This morning, before we went to Costco. The garage door opener. The thing Eduardo kept meaning to fix because it groaned and stuttered. The thing that might not just be broken, but wrong, infected, corrupted by whatever Samuel's innocent game had invited in." Pastor Jim stood slowly, his knees popping. "That'll do it. Kids playing with rituals they don't understand, using technology as a conduit. You opened a door, son, and something came through wearing a face it thought would get close to you." "But why Alejandro's face?" Eduardo asked. "Because it feeds on fear, confusion, violated trust." "What's more terrifying than seeing someone you love become something impossible? It probably would have worn all your faces eventually if we let it." "Would have." I caught the past tense. "It's not over." Pastor Jim looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, believed too much. "It's not over. But we're going to make it over. Everyone join hands. We're going to pray around this house, seal every entrance, every window, every door. We're going to make this place so full of the Holy Spirit that nothing unholy can stand to be here." We joined hands in a circle, my small family and this large pastor who'd appeared when we needed him. As he began to pray, his voice deep and certain, I felt something shift in the air. The oppressive weight that had been pressing down since 3:58 p.m. began to lift. The clock started ticking again, freed from their frozen moment. But as Pastor Jim prayed, as he walked us through each room, anointing doorways with oil, as he spoke about protection and deliverance, I kept thinking about what he'd said. "It probably would have worn all your faces eventually." Would have. Past tense. Like it was over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. We spent 3 hours praying, Pastor Jim had us recite scripture neither Eduardo nor I knew we remembered from our sporadic church attendance. He made Samuel apologize out loud for playing with forces beyond his understanding, made him renounce any invitation he might have accidentally extended. He had Alejandro hold his iPad while we prayed over it, cleansing it of any residual connection to whatever had touched it. By the time Pastor Jim left at 8:47 p.m., I was hyper-aware of time, now checking clocks obsessively. We were exhausted, drained in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. The boys fell asleep on the couch, watching cartoons curled against each other like puppies. Eduardo and I sat at the kitchen table sharing a bottle of wine we'd been saving for our anniversary, trying to make sense of the senseless. "Do you think it's really gone?" I asked. Eduardo took a long drink before answering. "I think Pastor Jim thinks it's gone." "That's not what I asked." "I know." We slept in the living room that night, all four of us. Dragged mattresses downstairs, made a fort like we used to when the boys were younger. Every time one of us startled awake, and we all did multiple times, the others were there, solid and real and breathing. Human breath with the right number of teeth, the right number of fingers. For 3 days, everything was normal. We went to work. The boys played video games. We ate dinner as a family. The only sign anything had happened was that none of us would go in the garage alone. We'd all found excuses to park in the driveway, claiming it was easier, faster, more convenient. The garage door stayed closed. On the fourth day, I was folding laundry when I heard Alejandro talking to someone in his room. Not unusual, he often narrated his Minecraft builds or acted out scenes with his action figures. But something about the rhythm of the conversation made me pause. There were gaps, like he was waiting for responses. "No, I can't come play right now," I heard him say. "Mom said I have to clean my room first." A pause. "I know you have the same toys. That's weird, right?" Another pause longer. "Why do you sound like me?" I dropped the laundry and ran. His door was closed but not locked. When I burst in, he was sitting on his bed looking at the closet. The closet door was open, just a cracked darkness visible through the gap despite his room being flooded with afternoon sunlight. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "The kid in the closet," Alejandro said matter-of-factly. "He says his name is Alejandro too. He says he lives here too. He says—" His face scrunched up in confusion. "He says he's me, but better." I grabbed him, pulled him out of the room, slammed the door behind us. My hands shook as I called Eduardo, called Pastor Jim, even called my mother in Brownsville to pray the rosary. But by the time Eduardo got home, when we opened Alejandro's door together, the closet was just a closet. No darkness that shouldn't be there, no other Alejandro. But on the inside of the closet door, drawn in what looked like crayon but smelled like copper pennies, was a smiley face with too many teeth. That night I found Samuel's sketchbook. Page after page of drawings, all dated from the past 4 days. Pictures of our family, normal at first glance. But in each one there was a fifth figure. Sometimes small, hidden in the background. Sometimes large, looming over us. Always smiling. Always watching. Always with Alejandro's face, but wrong stretched and distorted like a funhouse mirror. "When did you draw these?" I asked Samuel. He looked at the sketchbook like he'd never seen it before. I don't remember drawing these. We tried to throw the sketchbook away. It was back on Samuel's desk the next morning. We burned it in Eduardo's BBQ pit. It was back unburned, every page intact. Finally, Eduardo locked it in the safe with the gun, and there it stayed. But sometimes, late at night, I swear, I could hear pages turning behind that steel door. The forgetting started gradually. First, we'd lose minutes. I'd be making breakfast, and suddenly it would be lunch, the stove cold, the eggs uncracked, but somehow the clock had jumped forward 3 hours. Eduardo would leave for work and arrive 4 hours late with no memory of where the time went, his car's GPS showing he'd driven to addresses that didn't exist. The boys had it worse. Alejandro would forget his own name, sometimes look confused when we called him, then snap back like nothing happened. Samuel started a journal to track the lost time, but entries would appear in handwriting that looked like his but couldn't be. The words were backward mirror-written or in languages he didn't know. Then came the morning I woke up and didn't remember why the dresser was in front of our bedroom door. "Eduardo," I shook him awake, "why is the furniture moved?" He looked at the dresser like it was a puzzle. There was a reason. Something happened. Something with the boys." We moved the dresser back, confused but not alarmed. The mind is so good at explaining away the inexplicable. We must have been rearranging furniture and forgotten. We've been working too hard. Stress from Eduardo's job, my long shifts. That had to be it. The memories didn't vanish all at once. They faded like old photographs, colors bleeding out until only vague shapes remained. By September, we knew something significant had happened in August, but the details were gauze fog smoke. The boys stopped talking about it entirely. The sketchbook in the safe gathered dust, unopened, forgotten. By Halloween, it was gone completely. The only evidence was a lingering unease about the garage, a preference for parking in the driveway that we couldn't explain. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch Alejandro staring at his reflection in windows, tilting his head like he was looking for something that should be there but wasn't. 7 years. 7 years of normal life, or as normal as life ever is. The boys grew. Samuel turned 17, all gangly limbs and deepening voice college brochures scattered across his room. Alejandro, 14, now taller than me, still sweet, but with that teenage edge creeping in. Eduardo got promoted. I switched to day shift. We talked about moving to a bigger house, but never did. Something always held us back, some attachment to this place we couldn't quite name. October 15th, 2022, a Saturday. We were driving back from Samuel's SAT prep class, all 4 of us in the car because we'd planned to get lunch after. The radio was on some true crime podcast Samuel had been obsessed with lately. The host was talking about disappearances, about people who vanished and came back wrong, about something called the Mandela effect, where groups of people remember things that never happened or forget things that did. Then they played a snippet from another podcast. "Today we're discussing doppelgangers," the voice said. "Entities that can perfectly mimic someone's appearance, but there's always something slightly off. Too many teeth fingers that bend wrong movements that don't quite." All 4 of us gasped at the exact same moment. I had to pull over on the shoulder of I-10, my hands shaking too badly to drive. Cars whizzed past at 70 miles per hour, but inside, our Honda Pilot time had stopped. We sat in perfect silence for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, as 7 years of suppressed memories came flooding back in vivid, horrifying detail. "The garage," Alejandro whispered. "There was something in the garage that looked like me." "6 fingers," Samuel added, his voice cracking like he was 10 again. "It had 6 fingers and too many teeth." Pastor Jim Eduardo said he came and prayed and we thought it was over, but "The sketchbook," I interrupted. "Samuel, your sketchbook in the safe." We drove home in tense silence, each lost in our own recovered memories. The house looked exactly the same as we'd left it that morning, but now it felt different, tainted, like coming back to a crime scene. Eduardo went straight to the safe. His fingers trembled as he entered the code, our anniversary date. He remembered that now. The safe clicked open, and there it was. Samuel's sketchbook from 2015, dusty but intact. He opened it with the careful precision of a bomb technician. The pages were worse than I remembered. Not just drawings, but words, sometimes in Samuel's handwriting, sometimes in something that looked like a child had tried to copy his writing with their non-dominant hand. It never left. Still here. Watching from the garage. Learning to be better at being him. And on the last page, dated just days before the memories faded, "When you forget, I'll still remember." "Mom," Alejandro said, and his voice was small, scared, 7 years old again. "If we forgot for 7 years, what else have we forgotten? How many times has this happened?" I didn't have an answer, but Eduardo, still staring at the sketchbook, said, "Look at this." He'd found something tucked in the back cover. a photograph I didn't remember taking. Our family at Christmas 2015, 4 months after the incident. We were all smiling, normal, happy. But in the reflection on the TV screen behind us, there were 5 figures. The 5th was standing behind the couch between the boys, its hand on each of their shoulders. 6 fingers splayed possessively. "It never left," Samuel read from one of his journal entries. Jesus Christ, it never left. "Language," I said automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of correcting his language when we'd just discovered we'd been living with something inhuman for 7 years. "We need to check the security cameras," Eduardo said. We'd installed a system 3 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. High-definition night vision motion activated, storing 30 days of footage on a cloud server. We crowded around Eduardo's laptop as he logged in, scrolled back to last night. 2:47 a.m. The garage camera triggered by motion. The playback started. The garage door was opening, but slowly, just 3 inches. Enough for a small hand to slip under and wave at the camera. 6 fingers pale in the infrared light. The hand withdrew, the door closed. Eduardo fast-forwarded 2:47 a.m. October 14th. Same thing, 2:47 a.m. October 13th, October 12th. Every single night as far back as the recordings went. "That's our garage," Alejandro said unnecessarily. "That's happening right now. Every night." "Why 247 inches?" Samuel asked, ever the analytical one. I did the math in my head nurse's training, making medical calculations automatic. 247. If you convert that to minutes, it's 167 minutes. In seconds, it's 10:020. Nothing significant. But then, in a 12-hour format, 2:47 p.m. is 14:47 military time. "So," Eduardo prompted, 14:47. Alejandro was 7 in 2015. He's 14 now. We all looked at Alejandro, who had gone very pale. "It's counting," he said. "It's been counting the years." "Or waiting," Samuel suggested, which was somehow worse. We spent the rest of that day tearing apart 7 years of family photos, videos, social media posts, looking for anomalies we'd trained ourselves not to see. And we found them. God help us, we found so many. Every birthday party photo had an extra shadow. Every Christmas morning video had moments where the audio doubled like 2 voices speaking in unison. Alejandro's middle school graduation video, there was a full second where 2 Alejandros walked across the stage, one slightly behind the other before the image resolved into one. But the worst was a video from last month, Samuel's college interview practice that we'd recorded so he could review his performance. 43 minutes in, while Samuel discussed his career goals, something moved in the background. The closet door in the hallway opened, and Alejandro walked out. Except Alejandro was at soccer practice. I remembered because I'd picked him up afterward, brought him home just as Eduardo was finishing recording with Samuel. We watched that segment 15 times, frame by frame. It was perfect. Every detail correct, the way Alejandro walked, the Adidas shirt he'd worn that day, even the way he pushed his hair back when it fell in his eyes. Perfect, except for the smile, that same too-wide smile from 7 years ago. And as it walked past the camera, it looked directly at the lens and winked, 6 fingers visible for just 1 frame as it raised its hand. "How many times has it been in the house?" I asked, though I didn't want to know the answer. "How many times has it been us?" Samuel countered, which was the question I'd been avoiding, because if it could look like Alejandro, if it had been practicing for 7 years, learning to be better at being him, how would we know? How many family dinners had 5 place settings that we remembered as 4? How many times had I tucked in 2 Alejandros, kissing 2 foreheads, saying good night to both my son and something wearing his face? "Last week," Alejandro said suddenly, "last week I woke up and my shoes were on the wrong feet. But I remembered putting them on correctly." "Tuesday," Samuel added, "I came home from school and you were in the kitchen, Mom. You made me a sandwich. But then you came home from work an hour later and asked why I didn't text you for a ride." "I've been having dreams," Eduardo admitted. Dreams where I wake up and there's someone standing at the foot of our bed just watching. But when I turn on the light, it's one of the boys saying they had a nightmare, except their eyes are always wrong in the dreams. Too still. Like doll's eyes. I thought about all the little moments over the years. The times I'd called for Alejandro and he'd answered from 2 different rooms. The mornings I'd found the garage door open with no explanation. The food that disappeared from the fridge more than a teenage boy could eat. The extra laundry that appeared clothes I didn't remember buying. It's been living with us, I said, the full horror of it settling over me like a shroud. For 7 years it's been living in our house and we forgot. We just forgot. No, Eduardo corrected, and his engineer's mind was working, processing, analyzing. We were made to forget. That's different. That's intentional. It wanted us to forget so it could, study us, replace one of us. Practice, Alejandro said quietly. It's been practicing being me. We sat with that revelation for a long moment, the weight of 7 years of violation pressing down on us. My baby boy stalked and studied by something that wanted to be him, to replace him, to become him so perfectly that even his own family wouldn't know the difference. We need to leave, I said. Pack everything. Tonight. We can't stay here. But even as I said it, that same slippery feeling returned. The thought of leaving dissolved before I could hold on to it, like oil on water, like smoke through fingers. Mom, Samuel said, his voice strange, look at your hand. I looked down. There was writing on my palm in my own handwriting, don't forget again. I had no memory of writing it. Check your phones, Eduardo said urgently. We all pulled them out. Mine had 17 voice memos I didn't remember recording, all from different dates over the past 7 years. Samuel had Notes app entries titled, Remember This, and It's Still Here, and Check the Garage at 2:47. Alejandro's phone had videos, dozens of them, of him talking to the camera, warning himself, begging himself to remember. I played one of my voice memos from 3 years ago, my own voice exhausted and terrified. Maria, if you're listening to this, you've remembered again. This is the 4th time. It always makes us forget, but we're getting better at leaving ourselves clues. Check the attic. Behind the Christmas decorations, we hid something there. Eduardo was already moving, grabbing the ladder from the garage, and even that simple act, entering the garage, took enormous courage. We all went with him, strength in numbers afraid to separate. The attic access was in the hallway ceiling, a place we rarely went, just twice a year to swap seasonal decorations. Behind the plastic bins of tinsel and ornaments wrapped in a trash bag was a box I didn't recognize. Inside, hundreds of photos, USB drives, a camcorder from 2016 we didn't remember buying, and a journal in my handwriting. The first entry, October 31st, 2015, we remember again. Pastor Jim says the blessing didn't work because it's not a demon, it's something else. Something that exists between spaces in the gaps of reality. It feeds on belonging, on being part of something. It chose our family. It chose Alejandro's face. And every time we forget, it gets stronger. I flipped through pages, years of entries in different handwriting, mine, Eduardo's, even the boys as they got older. All documenting encounters, theories, failed attempts to get rid of it. A priest who said it wasn't spiritual but quantum. A physicist from Rice University who measured impossible readings in our garage before his equipment failed. A medium who took one look at our house and ran. The last entry was in Alejandro's handwriting, dated just 6 months ago. I see it sometimes, not the thing pretending to be me, but the real it. It's nothing like a person. It's like someone took the idea of loneliness and gave it teeth. It doesn't want to hurt us. It wants to be us. It wants to be loved. That's why it takes my face. I'm the youngest, the most loved. It thinks if it becomes me perfectly, it will finally belong somewhere. It doesn't understand that love can't be stolen, only earned. But it's learning. God help us, it's learning to feel. The camcorder had footage, dozens of hours. Eduardo connected it to his laptop with shaking hands. The first video started with me looking directly at the camera, dated 2018. Maria, you need to watch this, all of it. Don't let yourself forget again. What followed was impossible. Footage of our family, but wrong. 5 people at dinner conversation flowing normally, except one. Alejandro would occasionally flicker his edges, blurring like a bad signal. Christmas morning with 2 boys opening presents, while a 3rd boy watched from the stairs unnoticed by anyone except the camera. And then the direct encounters. Alejandro, the real one, sitting across from himself at the kitchen table having a conversation. "Why do you want to be me?" Real Alejandro asked. "I don't want to be you," the thing replied in his exact voice. "I want to be real. You're just the door." Door to what? To feeling, to being, to mattering. The video cut to black, then resumed with Eduardo talking to the camera. It's getting stronger. It doesn't just mimic anymore. It's starting to have its own thoughts, its own desires. We think that's worse, but maybe it's better. Maybe if it becomes real enough, it won't need to pretend anymore. Another video, this one from last year, Samuel filming himself in his room. To whoever watches this, probably me, the thing isn't malicious. I've been documenting patterns. It only appears when we're vulnerable, when Alejandro is sad, when mom's exhausted from work, when dad's traveling. It's trying to help in its broken way. Last week when I was sick, I heard Alejandro bring me soup, but Alejandro was at soccer practice. The soup was perfect, exactly how mom makes it. It's learned to care for us. That's so much worse than if it just wanted to hurt us. The final video on the camcorder was from today, this morning, hours before we remembered. It was footage from a camera I didn't know we had positioned in Alejandro's room. 2:47 a.m. His closet door opened and something crawled out. Not Alejandro, not anymore. It had given up on perfect mimicry and private moments. It was tall, too tall for a 14-year-old with joints that bent in too many places. Its face was Alejandro's, but stretched like taffy features sliding and reforming. It moved to his bed, stood over him, watching. Then it spoke not in Alejandro's voice, but in something older, tired, almost sad. 7 years, 3 months, 15 days. That's how long I've been trying. You dream so beautifully. Dreams of belonging, of family, of being loved. I taste them, these dreams. They're teaching me to want things I can never have. I could take your place. I've practiced enough. Your mother wouldn't know. Your father would never suspect. Your brother might wonder, but he'd accept it. I could live your life perfectly, but it wouldn't be real, would it? The love they'd give me would be meant for you. I'd always be stealing something that was never mine. It reached out with 1, 2 long arm fingers, 6 of them hovering inches from Alejandro's sleeping face. But I'm so tired of being nothing. Of existing in the spaces between seconds and the corners of eyes and the moments you forget. What if I could make you all forget permanently? Not just suppress the memories, but erase them entirely. Then I wouldn't be replacing you. I'd just be... Would that be worse, or would it be mercy? The thing turned to look directly at the camera, and its eyes... God, its eyes were so human now, filled with genuine pain. You're going to remember today, October 15th. You always remember on October 15th. Something about the date, about the way the light falls, about the thinness between worlds. You'll watch this video. You'll be afraid. You'll try to leave again, but you can't. I'm not keeping you here. You're keeping me here. Your fear, your love, your refusal to let go of this place. You've made a home, and I'm just another thing living in the walls. We're bound together now, family, in the most horrible way. It crawled back into the closet, movement spider-like and wrong, but just before it disappeared, it whispered, "Tell Alejandro, I'm sorry. I never meant to steal his face. It was just the first beautiful thing I ever saw." The video ended. We sat in stunned silence. Then Alejandro spoke, his voice steady, despite the tears running down his face. "It's in my room right now, isn't it, in the closet? Waiting." "We don't know that," I started, but he was already walking upstairs. We scrambled to follow Eduardo, grabbing his gun, though we all knew it was useless. Alejandro opened his bedroom door and walked straight to the closet. We crowded behind him, Eduardo trying to push forward to protect, but Alejandro held up his hand. "No, it's been 7 years. We need to end this." He opened the closet door. It was there, not hiding anymore, not pretending. It stood impossibly tall in the small space, body folded in angles that hurt to perceive. It still wore Alejandro's face, but older now, like a preview of who he might become. 21, maybe 25, handsome in that awkward way teenagers grow into. But the eyes were ancient, older than our house, older than Houston, older than human memory. "Hello," it said, and its voice was layered Alejandro at 7, at 14, at ages he'd never reached. "You remember." "I remember," Alejandro said simply. "You've been with us the whole time." "Yes, watching us, learning from you." Why my face? The thing tilted its head, that too-far motion that still made my stomach turn. "Because when I first saw you 7 years old, crying because your brother was mean to you, your mother held you and your tears became laughter in 3 seconds. I'd existed for so long in empty spaces, never understanding why humans clung to each other. But in that moment I understood. Love isn't just a word, it's transformation. It's the ability to change someone's entire world with a touch. I wanted to know how that felt." "And do you," Alejandro asked, "know how it feels?" "Yes." The word was heavy with sorrow. "That's the cruelest part. I've learned to love you all. Genuinely. Not mimicry, not pretense. Real love. I love how Maria sings off-key in the shower. I love how Eduardo talks to himself when he's solving problems. I love how Samuel pretends to be tough but still sleeps with his childhood blanket. I love how you, Alejandro, leave food out for the stray cats, even though your parents told you not to. I've become capable of love, but I can never receive it, because any love given to me would be meant for the face I'm wearing." "So what do we do?" Eduardo asked, his voice rough. "How does this end?" The thing looked at each of us in turn, and I swear I saw genuine affection in those ancient eyes. "You tell me to leave, and mean it, all of you, together, that's all it would take. I'm bound here by your inability to let go of the trauma, of the mystery, of the fear that's become familiar. You keep remembering because part of you needs me here. I'm the thing that makes you appreciate normal. I'm the shadow that makes the light valuable." "But you'd have nowhere to go," Samuel said, and I was surprised by the compassion in his voice. "I existed in nowhere for eons before I found you. I can do it again. But I'll be different now. I'll carry the memory of belonging even if I never belong again. That's something. That's more than I had before." We stood in a circle, my broken, beautiful family. And this thing that had haunted us, lived with us, learned from us. 7 years of violation and terror, but also 7 years of something trying desperately to understand what it meant to be human, to be loved, to matter. "What's your name?" Alejandro asked suddenly. "Your real name, not Alejandro." "What are you called?" The thing's face shifted, features becoming less defined, more honest. "I don't have one. I never needed one before. Names are for things that belong somewhere." Alejandro looked at us, some silent communication passing between father and sons. Then he turned back to the thing in the closet. "Your name is Echo, because you've been reflecting us back at ourselves. And echoes fade, but they prove something was there," someone called out. For the first time in 7 years, the thing Echo smiled with genuine warmth. Not too many teeth, not too wide, just a sad, grateful smile. "Thank you." "Echo," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You need to leave now." "Echo," Eduardo continued, "this is our home. You need to go." "Echo," Samuel added, "we'll remember you, but you can't stay." Finally, Alejandro, looking at his own face, worn by something ancient and lonely. "Echo, I forgive you. Now go." The air in the room shimmered. The temperature dropped, rose, normalized. Echo's form began to fade, edges first, like a photograph dissolving. But before it disappeared completely, it spoke one last time. "Check the garage tomorrow, 2:47 p.m., not a.m. There's something I left for you. something that belongs here. And then it was gone. Not dramatically, not with special effects, just gone like it had never been there at all. We stood in Alejandro's room staring at an empty closet that suddenly seemed too small to have held anything at all. The house felt different, lighter, like a pressure we'd lived with so long we'd stopped noticing it had finally lifted. That night, for the first time in 7 years, we all slept through until morning. No strange sounds, no movements in the periphery, no sense of being watched. Just sleep deep and dreamless. At exactly 2:47 p.m. the next day, we went to the garage together. On Alejandro's booster seat, the one from 2015 somehow still there despite him not using it for years, was a photo album we'd never seen before. Inside, hundreds of pictures. Not creepy surveillance shots or distorted family portraits. They were moments Echo had witnessed, but we'd forgotten. Eduardo teaching Samuel to ride a bike, both of them laughing as they fell into the grass. Me dancing with Alejandro in the kitchen to Disney songs, flour in our hair from a failed baking attempt. The four of us asleep on the couch during a movie night piled together like puppies. Birthday candles being blown out, wishes being made, tears being dried, victories being celebrated. 7 years of love captured by something that could only watch, never participate. The last page had a note in handwriting that wasn't quite any of ours, but somehow all of ours. Thank you for teaching me that existence isn't enough. We need to matter to someone. Even if I never mattered to anyone again, I mattered to you. I was your echo. That's more than nothing. That's everything. P.S. Alejandro, you're going to be tall. I've seen it. 6 feet at least. Stop worrying. P.P.S. Check your fears. Sometimes they're just lonely things looking for a home. We kept the album. It sits on our coffee table now, a conversation starter that we can never quite explain to visitors. Sometimes I flip through it, remembering moments I'd forgotten, seeing our family through the eyes of something that desperately wanted to belong. It's been 3 months since Echo left. The garage door still opens sometimes at 2:47 a.m. Not every night, maybe once a week. Just 3 inches, just for a moment. Not a hand anymore, just a small gap like something checking that we're okay. We don't talk about fixing it anymore. Some hauntings I've learned aren't about fear, they're about loneliness. And some ghosts don't want to hurt you, they just want to be seen, to be known, to be remembered. Every family has something living in their walls. Most just never notice. We noticed. And strangely, terrifyingly beautifully, we're grateful. But last night Alejandro came to our room at 2:47 a.m. I had a dream, he said. Echo found another family, one with twins. It's learning to be both of them. I don't know if it was just a dream. I don't know if I want to know. But somewhere out there, something lonely is trying again. Learning to love, learning to belong, learning to be human in the only way it knows how, by watching, mimicking, becoming. God help that family. God help Echo. God help us all. Because now when I look at my children, I sometimes count their fingers. 5, always 5. So far.